David, after 16 years, we're eliminating your position, my boss said flatly. Clean out your desk by the end of the day. My name is David Foster, 54 years old. Until that Monday morning, I was the senior systems analyst at Stratix Corp. Systems, based in Franklin Hills, Indiana. For nearly 2 decades, I had been the backbone of the IT department. From dial-up modems to cloud architecture, I'd seen 3 CEOs rise and fall. Through mergers, rebrands, cyber attacks, and 3 a.m. server crashes, I stayed. I trained every junior hire. I recovered every lost forever file. I missed birthdays and holidays without ever asking for recognition. So when Chad Monroe, our New Age MBA boss, called me into his office with Lisa from HR already seated, I didn't need a speech. I already knew. The energy in that building had shifted weeks ago. Still, I nodded once. I understand. No anger, no protest. Just silence. That kind of silence that makes people nervous. Back at my desk, I began packing slowly. A framed photo of my daughter, a ceramic mug my son made in 8th grade, a tiny cactus that somehow survived 16 years of fluorescent lighting. Around me, younger employees glanced, then quickly looked away. Most of them were coders I'd trained myself, good kids, but they had no idea what they were sitting on. None of them could navigate the legacy systems I'd built, or trace the admin credentials buried 3 layers deep in every corner of the network. Bethany from marketing stopped by, her voice low and furious. "David, I just heard. This is insane. You basically built this place." I shrugged. Companies change. But without warning? After everything you've done? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. As I walked out, Chad stepped from his glass office. No handshake, no thank you. Just watching. Making sure I was really leaving. What none of them knew, what none of them ever bothered to ask, was that I had quietly become the most essential person in the entire building. Not because I was brilliant, but because I was thorough. And as I sat in my car outside that 12-story glass monument to corporate forgetfulness, I knew something they didn't. I had copies. The security badge I'd just turned in had been renewed 16 times. As I started the engine and drove away, I wasn't angry, just clear-headed, focused. They had no idea what was coming on Wednesday. I'd been with Stratix Corp since it was just 2 floors in a rented business park. Started the year my daughter Emma was in kindergarten. Now she was wrapping up her grad program in Boston. The company grew, and I grew with it. I turned down better offers over the years, not because I lacked ambition, but because loyalty still meant something to me. My wife, Emily, used to joke that the servers were my second family. She wasn't entirely wrong. I knew every piece of that infrastructure, every outdated workaround, every buried override command from 3 upgrades ago. I was the guy who made things work when no one else could even understand where to start. That system I built? It had survived 3 acquisitions, 2 failed app launches, a ransomware scare, and a parade of executives who made bold promises and disappeared before results ever showed. Then, Chad Monroe showed up. 5 years ago, he was brought in as our new VP of IT. Smooth talker, Harvard MBA. Called people resources, not names. Everything was about efficiency, agility, transformation, which usually meant cutting the people who actually got things done. At first, I tried to help. Explained. The layers of legacy code, the vendor quirks, the undocumented patches. "We need to future-proof," he'd say in meetings, staring at his iPad and never at me. Then came Ethan Black, the outside consultant Chad brought in 6 months ago. Tailored suits, overconfident handshake, Stanford degree stamped all over. His profile. The 2 of them started whispering in glass rooms, dodging my questions with buzzwords. That's when things got weird. Subtle changes to my access. Admin-level permissions quietly revoked. Fewer meeting invites. Emails forwarded without my name on CC. I didn't complain. I just watched. "Everything okay at work?" Emily asked one night as we sat on the porch, fall air settling in. "Just changes," I replied, sipping my beer. "Nothing I haven't seen before. But these changes felt different. I was being pushed out, but gently, deliberately. Then I saw it, buried in a file server nobody but me ever checked, a company-wide memo outlining a complete restructure of our IT department, now under Ethan Black's leadership. My name? Gone. Not a single mention. And that's when I noticed something else. Something not just insulting, but illegal. During a routine background scan, one of those forgotten tasks I still bothered to run, I caught the pattern. Small, recurring payments. To a vendor no one had ever heard of, and that's when everything changed. The payments were small at first, a few $100s, then a few thousand, all routed to a vendor I'd never heard of, Apex Solutions Group. Curious, I ran a background. Check. Apex had been registered just last year. Its listed business address? A UPS store in a strip mall across town. Legit vendors don't operate out of mailbox rentals, but I didn't raise the alarm. Not yet. I made a copy. Then another. I flagged the transactions, backed up the financial logs, and kept watching. Because sometimes, the quiet man in the corner sees everything, precisely because everyone assumes he sees nothing. The morning after my termination, I sat in my home office, still wearing yesterday's clothes. No alarm, no commute, just the kind of silence that feels like both a defeat and a beginning. Emily placed a mug of coffee beside me, warm and steady. No words. After 19 years of marriage, she knew the drill. "I'm going to the store," she said gently. "Need anything?" I shook my head. Once the door clicked shut, I reached under the desk and opened the bottom drawer, unlocked a small steel case. Inside, a collection of encrypted flash drives. Years ago, the legal department had approved me, setting up off-site backups for internal audit tracking. They forgot. I didn't. I plugged one in. The screen blinked awake. Folders bloomed open, logs, internal memos, security notes, meeting transcripts I was never supposed to see, and there it was, a complete history of payments to Apex, $1.8 million over 18 months. All greenlit through a chain of approvals that led directly to our chief financial officer, Trent Lawson. The numbers lined up too perfectly. Each transfer coincided with a legitimate software renewal, but every invoice was padded by 15 to 20%. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to steal, drip by drip. I dug deeper. Pulled Apex's business registration. The listed owner? Thomas Lawson, Trent's brother-in-law. A quick LinkedIn search sealed it. They were siphoning money through fake markups, laundering theft under the disguise of routine expenses. I leaned back, staring at the screen. My pulse didn't rise. My jaw didn't clench. This wasn't anger. It was precision. Cold clarity. For 16 years, I'd been the one fixing their problems, protecting their data, keeping their secrets, and when they were done with me, they tossed me out like expired software. My phone buzzed. A message from Mark, the junior analyst I'd mentored. The past 2 years. Sorry about what happened. Total BS. Ethan's already moving into your office. I stared at it for a second, then set the phone down. Because now I knew. They hadn't just fired me. They'd tried to erase me. And that was their biggest mistake. By the time I set the phone down, everything clicked into place. Chad Monroe and Trent Lawson hadn't just fired me for budget reasons. They needed me out of the building before anyone connected the dots. They probably assumed I was just some outdated tech guy with too much gray in his beard and not enough business sense. They thought the evidence would disappear with me. They were wrong. I opened my email and drafted a message to the Stratix Core Board of Directors, laying out what I'd uncovered. But halfway through, I stopped, It was too direct, too easy to dismiss as a bitter rant from a disgruntled former employee. What I needed wasn't noise, I needed leverage. Evidence so clean, so undeniable, it couldn't be spun or buried. I deleted the draft, and I started planning. Wednesday was the perfect storm. Quarterly financials, bonus approvals, full board attendance. At 9 a.m. sharp, I sat parked across the street from headquarters. Employees streamed in, clutching coffee and small talk. In the passenger seat beside me, my laptop, logged into a ghost email account I'd built years ago for internal security drills. It looked like an in-house system, but it lived outside the firewall, untraceable. At 9:15 a.m., I sent the first shot, an anonymous message to Chad with the subject, "Financial irregularities, urgent review needed." I laid out just enough to scare him. Unexplained payments, irregular vendor data, inflated renewals. But I left out the family connection. If he knew, he'd panic. If he didn't, he'd investigate. Either way, I'd learned something. By 9:45, my phone buzzed. Chad Monroe. I let it go to voicemail. "David, we need to talk. Right away. Please call me back." I didn't. Instead, I headed to a quiet coffee shop, booted up again, and waited. At 10:30, another email came in. This time from Lisa Harper in HR. "Mr. Foster, we've received concerning communication from you that may violate your separation agreement. Please cease all contact with Stratix Core employees. Further contact may result in legal action." Classic. Corporate playbook. Threaten, isolate, silence. Except I hadn't signed any separation agreement. At noon, I drove to my bank. Inside the vault, I pulled out a second flash drive, older, deeper, and far more dangerous. Among its contents, a full map of Stratix Core's security permissions history, time-stamped logs, and user-level access reports. One detail stood out. 18 months ago, Trent Lawson personally requested expanded financial approval rights, right when Apex's payments began. Back home, 3 missed calls: Chad, Lisa, and now Ethan Black. I hadn't expected the consultant to jump in so soon. Interesting. Then came a message from Mark, the junior analyst. "Everyone's freaking out. Ethan called an emergency meeting. People say you sent some kind of fraud report. They're revoking your access to everything, even archived data. What's going on?" "Poor kid." I replied, "Don't get involved. Just watch." At 3 p.m., my home phone rang, a number I hadn't used in years. I picked up but said nothing. "David, this is Trent Lawson." His voice was calm. "Professional. We should talk about your concerns. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Is that what we're calling it now?" I asked. "Look, transitions are tough. If you have questions, there are proper channels. The board already knows," I said flatly. Silence. Then a sharper tone. "Let's meet tomorrow. Privately. We can make this right." "Sorry, I'm busy," I said, "and I think the board might be very interested in Apex Solutions Group and your brother-in-law." His breath caught, audibly. Then came the real voice. "You're making a serious mistake, but we can fix this. Severance, references, whatever you need. Goodbye, Trent." I hung up. 10 minutes later, another email from HR. My severance package had magically doubled, with a brand new non-disclosure agreement attached. They thought this was a shakedown. They still had no idea what was coming in, and I was just getting started. The scheme was simple, elegant even. Create shell companies that looked legitimate, send inflated invoices for actual services. Pocket the difference. Because the services were technically rendered just at bloated prices, most auditors wouldn't flag them. It didn't scream fraud, it whispered it. Over 3 years, they siphoned off nearly $4.5 million. I compiled everything into a clean, airtight report, spreadsheets showing monthly increases, vendor registrations linking back to Trent Lawson's family, Email threads revealing Chad Monroe's knowledge and participation. Then I did something no one expected. I picked up the phone and called Frank Dalton, a semi-retired board member I'd worked with years ago during a major cybersecurity overhaul. The kind of guy who still read footnotes, who still asked uncomfortable questions in meetings. "David Foster," he said on the second ring. "Heard you left Stratix Corp." "Not by choice," I replied. "Frank, I need 15 minutes. You'll want to see what I have." Silence. This why Chad and Trent were whispering through the whole board meeting yesterday. Probably, he chuckled. Always figured you knew where the bodies were buried. An hour later, we sat on a bench in Chestnut Park, 3 miles from headquarters. I handed him a sealed envelope, a printed summary, a labeled flash drive. Dates, numbers, connections. "I'm not looking for my job back," I told him. "I'm not looking for hush money. I just want the truth to reach the right people." Frank studied me. "Why me?" "Because you're the only one on that board who reads audit reports." He nodded slowly. "There's a finance committee review first thing tomorrow. Convenient timing, huh?" "Very," I said. He slipped the envelope into his coat. "If this checks out, heads will roll." "I'm counting on it." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Some guy named Ethan Black came by the house. Said it was urgent. I told him you were out. They were getting desperate. Perfect." Later that afternoon, I got 2 job offers, both from rival firms, both higher paying than anything I'd ever held. Both came with fat signing bonuses. I didn't even reply. This wasn't about career growth. It was about finishing what they started. That night, I logged into Stratix Corp's internal server one last time. Sloppy offboarding. My credentials were still active. "Thanks, Ethan. I scheduled an email to go out to every board member at 8 a.m. sharp, just before they'd approve bonuses for Q2 subject line. Before you sign off, please read attached." My full report. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear. I sat on the porch with coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood wake up. No alarm, no rush, just waiting. A.M. The email hit. 8:17. My phone lit up with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Assistance, legal, chaos. I let them all go to voicemail. At 9 a.m., the Emergency Finance Committee meeting began. Frank Dalton would be sitting at that table, watching their faces as the truth unfolded. By 9:32, a text from Mark lit up my screen. "Cops are here. Chad and Trent are being questioned. Ethan looks like he's going to puke. What did you do?" I didn't reply, but I smiled. At 10:00, I picked up a call from Stratix Corp's General Counsel. "Mr. Foster, this is Patricia Graves. We need you to come in immediately. I'm available by phone. This really requires an in-person—" "No, it doesn't," I said calmly. "Everything I know is in that report. Everything I have is backed up in multiple secure locations. If anything happens to me or my family, copies go to the SEC, IRS, and 3 major news outlets." Silence. "The board takes this extremely seriously," she said at last. "Executives have been placed on administrative leave. We would appreciate your cooperation." "I've already cooperated," I replied. "My part is done." I hung up and drove 20 miles out of town. No sense being too visible today. By lunch, the headlines had started appearing. Stratix Corp execs under investigation for financial misconduct. No names yet, but that was coming. At 2:00 p.m., Frank called. "It's a bloodbath. Lawson cracked first, tried to cut a deal, blamed Monroe for pressuring him. Monroe's denying everything. Ethan claims he was just a consultant. We've suspended all 3. Forensic accountants are coming Monday. We'll know the full damage then." I nodded to myself. I'd estimated $4.5 million. Frank continued. "The board wants to meet with you. They're creating a new role, Chief Security Officer, reports directly to the board. I'd suspected they might. But even then, I was surprised. "I'll think about it," I said. That evening, I told Emily everything. She didn't interrupt, just listened. And then she asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want to do?" I didn't know yet. The revenge? Complete? The liars? Exposed? Justice? Served cold. But going back meant walking through the same doors that discarded me after 16 years. Could I really do that? Later that night, I posted a single line to my quiet LinkedIn profile. Never burn bridges. Just let them collapse under the weight of their own greed. I opened my email and drafted a message to the Stratix Corp Board of Directors, laying out what I'd uncovered. But halfway through, I stopped. It was too direct, too easy to dismiss as a bitter rant from a disgruntled, former employee. What I needed wasn't noise, I needed leverage. Evidence so clean, so undeniable, it couldn't be spun or buried. I deleted the draft, and I started planning. Wednesday was the perfect storm. Quarterly financials, bonus approvals, full board attendance. At 9 a.m. sharp, I sat parked across the street from headquarters. Employees streamed in, clutching coffee and small talk. In the passenger seat beside me, my laptop, logged into a ghost email account I'd built years ago for internal security drills. It looked like an in-house system, but it lived outside the firewall, untraceable. At 9:15 a.m., I sent the first shot, an anonymous message to Chad with the subject, "Financial irregularities, urgent review needed." I laid out just enough to scare him: unexplained payments, irregular vendor data, inflated renewals. But I left out the family connection. If he knew, he'd panic. If he didn't, he'd investigate. Either way, I'd learned something. By 9:45, my phone buzzed. Chad Monroe. I let it go to voicemail. "David, we need to talk. Right away. Please call me back." I didn't. Instead, I headed to a quiet coffee shop, booted up again, and waited. At 10:30, another email came in, this time from Lisa Harper in HR. "Mr. Foster, we've received concerning communication from you that may violate your separation agreement. Please cease all contact with Stratix Corp employees. Further contact may result in legal action." Classic corporate playbook: threaten, isolate, silence. Except I hadn't signed any separation agreement. At noon, I drove to my bank. Inside the vault, I pulled out a second flash drive. Older, deeper, and far more dangerous. Among its contents, a full map of Stratix Corp's security permissions history, time-stamped logs and user-level access reports. One detail stood out. 18 months ago, Trent Lawson personally requested expanded financial approval rights, right when Apex's payments began. Back home, 3 missed calls: Chad, Lisa, and now Ethan Black. I hadn't expected the consultant to jump in so soon. Interesting. Then came a message from Mark, the junior analyst. "Everyone's freaking out. Ethan called an emergency meeting. People say you sent some kind of fraud report. They're revoking your access to everything, even archived data. What's going on?" Poor kid. I replied, "Don't get involved. Just watch." At 3 p.m., my home phone rang, a number I hadn't used in years. I picked up but said nothing. "David, this is Trent Lawson." His voice was calm, professional. "We should talk about your concerns. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Is that what we're calling it now?" I asked. "Look, transitions are tough. If you have questions, there are proper channels. The board already knows," I said flatly. Silence. Then a sharper tone. "Let's meet tomorrow. Privately. We can make this right." "Sorry, I'm busy," I said. "And I think the board might be very interested in Apex, Solutions Group, and your brother-in-law." His breath caught, audibly. Then came the real voice. "You're making a serious mistake. But we can fix this. Severance, references, whatever you need. Goodbye, Trent." I hung up. 10 minutes later, another email from HR. My severance package had magically doubled, with a brand new non-disclosure agreement attached. They thought this was a shakedown. They still had no idea what was coming, and I was just getting started. Within minutes of my LinkedIn post, the messages began, pouring in: old colleagues, quiet allies, even former critics. The quiet systems guy had taken down 3 executives without raising his voice. By Monday, the story was everywhere, not in headlines, but in whispers, in forwarded emails, in stunned Slack channels. Everyone suddenly remembered my name. That morning, I walked into Stratix Corps headquarters wearing a suit I hadn't touched in years. The security guard, same one who'd watched me walk out weeks ago, froze for a second, then stood straighter. "Welcome back, Mr. Foster," he said, printing a badge with hands that moved just a little faster. The elevator ride to the executive floor was surreal. I'd never had a reason to be up there before. Now they were waiting. For me. 10 board members sat around a polished table. Frank Dalton gave a subtle nod as I entered. The interim CEO, once COO, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Mr. Foster," she began, "thank you for coming." I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. The situation you exposed is unprecedented. The forensic team now estimates $5.2 million in diverted funds. Criminal charges are being filed. Still, I waited. Frank cleared his throat. "David, the board has unanimously voted to create a new position. Chief Information Security Officer. Full executive privileges. Reports directly to us." I nodded, then placed a folder on the table. "These are my conditions," I said. "Non-negotiable." She flipped through the pages. Her eyebrows climbed higher. Full audit authority across all departments. Veto power on all tech-related financial decisions. That's right. This is unusual. So was stealing. $5 million, I replied. That happened because no one was watching. Now someone will be. The room fell silent. "You have until noon," I said, standing. "I have other offers." As I reached the door, Frank asked, "Did you plan all this, David?" I turned slightly. "I didn't plan to be fired after 16 years, I said. But everything after that? That was just me doing what I've always done, identifying system vulnerabilities and fixing them. At 11:47 they called. They'd accepted every single condition. 6 months later, I sat in a sunlit corner office overlooking the Franklin Hills skyline, reviewing next quarter's security protocols. Trent Lawson had pled guilty. In exchange for cooperation, he'd get a lighter sentence, but still serious. Chad Monroe was still fighting, claiming ignorance. Ethan Black had vanished to Brazil, but extradition was underway. Most of the money had been recovered. Enough to save the company from collapse, my old team now reported to me, though I'd promoted Mark to run daily ops. The kid had talent, just needed someone to see it. A knock at the door. It was Emily, smiling. "Lunch?" I grabbed my jacket. As we passed through the IT floor, conversations quieted, not from fear, but respect. They knew. I could have burned the company to the ground. Instead, I saved it. In the elevator, she squeezed my hand. Happy? I thought for a second. The fury that drove me at the start was gone. What remained wasn't exactly joy. It was something deeper. Completion. "I'm good," I said. Outside, the October sun warmed our faces. As we crossed the street, my phone buzzed. A message from Frank. "Board approved your budget increase. Unanimous." I smiled. No pushback, no questions. Just trust. Emily noticed. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said, slipping the phone into my pocket. "Just thinking about bridges. Some collapse under their own weight. Others, once rebuilt, become stronger than ever before. And this time, I built it right. And if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or cast aside, remember this. You don't need to raise your voice to make an impact. You just need to know your worth and never stop building what matters. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, share it. Someone out there might need it more than you know.